swept across.
I know half of us were convinced that somehow, how did we avoid not getting it in Vegas in February?
Yeah. It stayed in Vegas. Okay, let's go to some boards here. We've got Montana's presidential race, and we're calling it for President Trump. No surprise there. Rhode Island. Chuck scooped us, Lester.
It showed up. I was about to look.
Yes, exactly. And in Maine, it's too early to call, but Biden is leading, although there is that one electoral vote in Maine that possibly the president could pick up. And in that scenario of an electoral tie, that could become extremely relevant. So there's your map at this hour, 1:15 on the East Coast. The road to 270, it's filling out, but we've got some key battlegrounds still open at this hour.
Why don't we bring in NBC News political contributor and co-host of The Circus on Showtime, John Heilman, into the conversation. John, it's great to see you. You just saw, hopefully you just saw Chuck's breakdown. What do you think about Georgia?
Well, I think that the New York Times is reporting that there was a water main break in Atlanta, in Fulton County. That means that they have said that they are not going to have a final count until tomorrow morning at the earliest. So that's the first thing. If that New York Times report is correct, we're going to be waiting for a while on Georgia. I do think that Chuck is laying out a scenario that is, as he looks at those counties that have not come all the way in, he's making a very strong point. Of all the stories of the last week, you guys, the last week of the campaign, the only of the non-core 6 battleground states, the real 6 battleground states, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Florida, and Arizona, those 6 states that both campaigns spent money in and fought in all year long. The story of the last 7 days was Georgia. There was people who fantasized about Texas, including me, about whether all the early vote meant something was changing in Texas. There were good theories of the case, and you explored all these second-tier battleground states. But in Georgia, there was something really was going on, and you could see the Biden campaign went in there late. They spent money there late. Barack Obama did his penultimate event of the campaign in Atlanta. This was a state that there was a growing conventional wisdom on both sides, I will say, not just Democrats but Republicans, that Joe Biden would have a better chance at taking Georgia than taking Florida. And as we sit here now, that piece of conventional wisdom has proven true. Donald Trump was stronger in Florida in 2020 than he was in 2016. And it is still the case that Joe Biden could win Georgia. And NBC News has been smart to not do what some others did earlier this evening and looked at some of that early return and said, Georgia's going to go to Donald Trump. We're seeing that the longer this night goes on, the better that state looks for Joe Biden. That's not to say he's going to win it, but he's still in it. And we might not know about that one, just like we're not going to know possibly about Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania for at least another 24 hours, maybe longer.
Speaking of, we've also held our fire on Arizona because we're awaiting vote there. And Doug Ducey, who is the governor of Arizona, tweeted a little earlier this evening, it's far too early to call the election in Arizona. Election day votes are not fully reported. And we haven't even started to count early ballots that were dropped off at the polls. In Arizona, we protected election day. Let's count the votes, all the votes before making declarations. So interesting to see. It looks like it's going to be a pause in Arizona, potentially no call tonight. But the governor there indicating not only are they counting election day votes, but when people brought their early ballots straight to the polls, that they still need to count those as well.
John, thanks very much. Good to talk to you. We're going to take a break. Be back with more Decision 2020 election night coverage after this short break.
Mail, early in person, or on election day.
Each state has its own set of rules for the way we cast our ballots.
Yes, it's a little confusing. That's why we have to figure it out now.
Take 15 minutes and plan your vote.
ASAP.
In some places, the polls are already open. Go!
Make sure your voice is heard.
Plan your vote. Plan your vote.
Plan your vote.
Washington feels more chaotic than ever. It's my job to ask the tough questions, left and right, and help you make sense of it all.
You ready to go to work? I'm so ready to go to work.
She's Joe Biden's choice to be next in line. But who is Kamala Harris? Join me, Joy Reid, as I explore her life's journey from Oakland to Washington on my 6-part podcast, Kamala, Next in Line. New episodes every Monday. Subscribe for free wherever you get your podcasts.
For breaking news in our changing world, download the NBC News app.
President Trump and Joe Biden hit the trail. At the center of this campaign, coronavirus.
The story
The battleground blitz as we enter the final stretch of the 2020 race.
from every angle.
If you were sitting here talking to Joe Biden and President Trump, what would you want to tell them right now?
On the ground
The wind standing these flames are expected to last another 24 hours.
and in depth.
We now have 2 vaccine trials on hold. Should people be concerned?
NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Good morning. Welcome to Today. We're glad to have you with us.
This fall, we're right there with you, whether you're back to school
What do you guys think? We're excited?
or back to work. We're keeping you safe
I love being back.
every morning on Today.
Police murder of unarmed black men has been an American way of death across centuries. After seeing the most comprehensive police reform bill ever introduced in Congress, I've begun to wonder if now is the time. If now is the time the protesters finally win.
The Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell, weeknights at 10 on MSNBC.
Good morning. Welcome to Today. We're glad to have you with us.
This fall, we're right there with you, whether you're back to school
What do you guys think? We're excited?
or back to work. We're keeping you safe
I love being back.
every morning on Today.
Welcome back to NBC News Election Night coverage, 2020 election. A lot of things in play right now. We're still waiting on some big battleground states, but a lot of different possibilities beginning to open up. Let's go first to Chuck, who's looking at some of those possibilities.
Yeah, let's go. I mean, we just want to keep checking in. I mean, I think that's, I know where everybody else is. We're down. I feel like we've got this down to it's right where we said it was going to be. Focus on the battleground states we told you they were going to be, right? These 3, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Let's just get a check in here. This is just incremental, as you can see. And again, it's almost all today's vote. Very little coming in. Let's just check to see how we're doing. Still nothing new out of Philadelphia, Andrea. We're sitting at the same number we were a half hour ago. So we got nothing there. Let's go to Michigan to see how things coming. I can tell you that Dante Cini, who is a Michigan native, our data guy, he's looked in here and he doesn't see things that look great for Trump and what's come in, which means that, this could be when everything comes in. This is why there's a lot of bullishness among Democrats that when the early vote, and again, we've barely touched the early vote here. As you can see, yellow is today's vote. The orange is when we get that. And we know the Michigan Secretary of State told me this. It was going to be 2 to 3 days, period, on Michigan. But the modeling right now does still favor Biden for what it's worth on that front. And I know everybody's thinking polls, modeling. I'm not believing any of this stuff. I get it. But I'm just letting you know what our data says at this point. And if you've seen here, and this is, again, Wisconsin's another one why Democrats are bullish that they're going to, that when we get the early vote and the mail-in vote all to come in, that they're going to overcome this difference. And really, the big area is going to be Milwaukee. That's going to be a huge dump, and we expect that vote between 4 and 7. But as you can see here, this is really narrowed. We're down to 4 percentage points. So it doesn't look like Donald Trump has enough same-day vote to build the pad there. And, of course, there's Georgia. Let's just see if we've gotten any new vote. A little bit, but not much. We're still waiting for most of that Atlanta vote. So there's your update right now. We're going to be crawling, maybe bundles of votes at a time here for a little bit.
And Andrew, and I'll ask you, Chuck, as well. If we're truly in a situation where we're waiting for Thursday for some of these results, tell me what it's going to look like between now and that period in terms of what we're hearing from the candidates, what how people are processing.
Look, Joe Biden got out there tonight because he was trying to win the perception battle, because it is taking longer. You know that they wanted to get a vote out of Georgia. They wanted to bag Georgia and North Carolina. They didn't think they could get Florida, but they wanted a different path than waiting, because they knew they'd have to wait days for the early vote from the 3 Rust Belt states. And so they really wanted to get it in before Pennsylvania because they knew what the president would do. And he went ahead and tweeted. Twitter flagged that tweet, said it was not accurate to talk about a rigged or stolen election when there are millions of votes still not counted. You just don't have the early vote. We've had an unprecedented election with so much early vote, and it's got to be counted.
Nebraska.
We have just called Nebraska 2 and Nebraska 1, which means, and it is not going to be solid red. I am curious to see how we do this. I don't think I'm supposed to make this change here. We'll get it back here in the map. You'll see, but we have called Nebraska 2 for Joe Biden, so he will get one more in here. And again,
all right, we're going to just pause briefly here, Chuck, for some stations to bring you local results as Decision 2020 election coverage continues on NBC. All right, we're back. Chuck, I'm sorry, pick up where you were.
Sorry, here we are in Nebraska, and I'm just trying to show you. We have called this now. It's not registering here, but we have called. Our decision desk says Joe Biden's going to win this electoral vote, which we know Nebraska splits up. So that's one. It's an important one. And again, look, Rich Lowry was first to point this out. This does add, especially if Arizona and Nevada end up both blue, this means the president needs 2 of his 3 from the blue wall states of Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. He can't just do this with Michigan. If indeed Arizona is headed in blue, Nevada is blue, and Minnesota stays the way it is. So that's what that Nebraska electoral vote does. It sort of adds one more hurdle to the president.
Yeah, I mean, Casey, the way it would shake out is, and this is where it gets interesting, because if Michigan and Wisconsin go for Biden, Arizona goes for Biden, and now you add that one little congressional district in Nebraska, then suddenly the Democrats don't need Pennsylvania. So I think that is why so much effort actually was focused on a single congressional district in Omaha, Nebraska.
Yeah, it's really remarkable. It could be the little electoral college vote that could for so many Democrats who, frankly, want a few more hours of sleep after a very long campaign, because you're exactly right. And Chuck laid out the math there. This sort of 269 to 269 2020 nightmare scenario really only plays out when you have that Nebraska vote going to Donald Trump. And we have just called it for Joe Biden. And that, as you outlined, means that if Biden does well in Michigan and Wisconsin, as currently my sources are still expecting, and Chuck walked through the data there with the caveats that we've had a lot of data that was wrong tonight. But what that does is it means that if there is a prolonged fight over ballots in Pennsylvania, and if there are these legal battles through the courts about counting ballots, et cetera, we may not have to know the answer to that in order to know who has won the White House in the Electoral College. Now, obviously, we are projecting out a lot here at, what time is it? 1:28 in the morning on Wednesday. We still, I think, do not know what we're going to say on the Today Show tomorrow, Savannah.
I think maybe we want to mention that where are we? Georgia now is too close to call. That's a new characterization.
Too close to call. All right, so we'll continue to keep our eye on that. Votes still being counted at this hour. We await decisions. We're going to take a brief pause here, let some of our stations rejoin our coverage. Let's pause for just a moment.
All right, welcome back to our 2020 election night / wee hours of the morning coverage. We're going to show you where we're at right now. I mentioned just a moment ago in the Georgia presidential race, it's too close to call now. That's one we've been watching carefully, waiting for a lot of votes to come in from the Atlanta area. Pennsylvania, too early right now.
All right, let's go to the upper Midwest. Minnesota, too early to call, but our projection is that Biden has a lead there. Arizona, same story, too early to call, but Biden does have a lead.
We're looking at North Carolina, been watching that closely for quite a while now. Too close to call. Maine, too early. Biden leads in Maine, however.
All right, let's go to Michigan. There's a state that we're not going to get the vote all counted up for a couple of days. Too early to call. Wisconsin, same story. Too early to call, and we're awaiting votes in Milwaukee area, among others.
Waiting for votes in Nevada. Too early to call in Nevada. Let's show you where we stand right now in the electoral tally. The road to 270. Donald Trump with 213. Biden with 210. One of them needs 270.
By the way, I just wanted to show you guys how that worked. I did Casey's calculation so we could show her work there. And as you can see, there is a right at the number. We had to make sure we call Hawaii. That assumes Hawaii votes Democratic as we do here. But Nevada, Arizona, if they hang on to that, then Democrats can do this without Pennsylvania or North Carolina or Georgia. Or you look at it the other way, the president can win Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia, and he's too short. And he'd be 2 electoral votes short at this point. But you talked about Georgia, and that ultimately, I think we need to go back there. We got to see if Mr. Heilman's report there about the water main break, how much that's going to, you know what, I think he's right, because this has been sitting at 87% for the last 20 minutes. So I'm not going to bother coming back in. We've been sitting at 236,000 spread. I think it is time to find out if our friends in Georgia have decided to go to bed tonight or whether they're going to keep counting vote and delivering it.
Okay. Assignment has been handed out. What about Nevada? Are we going to get any numbers from Nevada tonight?
Yeah, I know we kept threatening to put our man John Ralston on the air.
Yes.
John Ralston has done the math. He will tell you that, the way Nevada works, we don't have much, 7%. But Nevada is basically arguably a 2-county state. I'm going to mispronounce Washoe County. I always do, and my apologies, Mr. Ralston. That's where Reno is, Clark County, where Vegas is. Basically, are the population centers. Democrats run up the score here. Republicans want us. They got to basically match the Democrats there, and then roar big time in here. I think the only way the president actually wins this is if his overperformance with Latinos in Florida translates to Clark County in Las Vegas.
Okay. We want to bring in Democratic Senator Bob Casey of Pennsylvania, who knows the state inside and out, also spoke to former Vice President Biden tonight. What did he say to you? We've got reports, Senator Casey, that he was calling and saying, hey, where are the votes? How come we haven't seen the votes come in yet in some of these key counties for the Democrats?
No, we had a good conversation. He was just checking in, I guess about a little more than an hour ago. And I was telling him what I knew, which wasn't a lot in the blue counties. And I was expressing real frustration. We didn't have more numbers. But he was very patient and upbeat, and so am I. He's going to win Pennsylvania. It's going to be close. It's going to be a long count, but he's going to win.
So what is your assessment of the way the votes are coming in right now?
Well, because you have so many mail-in ballots in the blue counties, the 4 big suburban Philadelphia counties and Philadelphia itself and Allegheny County, those numbers aren't tabulated yet. And the president's smaller rural counties that he's done really well and have reported a lot more. But even in those counties, Joe Biden's been shaving off some numbers by getting more of a vote because you're not getting as much of a third-party vote. So the raw vote for Joe Biden is better in a lot of counties than it was in 16. And then the suburban Philadelphia vote is going to be monumental. And I think Allegheny County is going to be a lot better than 16. So it'll be close, and it might take a while to get to the final number, but maybe by sometime in the morning we'll know more about the bigger population counties.
Well, this is the hour of the morning when we get a little nerdy here. So let's get to Erie County, which can be a bellwether. The president was up there seeing Erie voters. Trump won that in 2016 by 2. Obama won it big in 08 and 12. So it feels like one of those counties that swings. What are you hearing?
Well, I haven't seen a final number there yet. But I think it's like a lot of places. I think he's going to be able to shave down margin. But I think in the end, this is an election now that will come down to one market and a half. In other words, half of the Pittsburgh market and half in the whole Philadelphia college market. When President Obama won the state in 2012, he won by 5, compared to only 2 markets.
Senator, I'm going to interrupt you just for a brief second, if you please, because we've got a call in Minnesota. NBC News projects that Joe Biden will win the state of Minnesota 10 electoral votes. And Senator, I'll let you react to that if you'd like.
That's great.
There's a another
win.
All right, good talking.
Thank you very much.
All right, be well.
Thank you, Senator. Well, that was interesting because remember we had heard from Jason Miller, the Trump campaign chair or advisor, earlier that he felt that Minnesota could be in play for President Trump. NBC now.
He gave us numbers that look like they're closer to right in North Carolina, but his Minnesota projection was pretty off. 8-point win. Look, this was a state that I'm going to guess that this, and you know, it's funny as we're sorting out this night, the president is the one that may look around the map and go, boy, there were some missed opportunities. They talked about Minnesota. They didn't make a real campaign in Minnesota. They talked about Nevada. They didn't make a real campaign in Nevada. You start to look around. Look, we're experiencing a major realignment in this country, a political realignment where it's lopsided on the popular vote, but it's dead even in this electoral college. We have this sort of rural urban split that is real. It looks like suburban America may be moving, sort of 60% with the blue team, with the 40% maybe hanging with the red team. And that means we are living in a very polarized world right now.
Flip side of that, should Democrats have done more in Georgia?
Well, it's interesting. I had a former Democratic member of Congress send me an email earlier tonight and go, I want to know who the staffer was that thought it was a good idea to send Joe Biden to Iowa and Ohio yesterday for stops, when basically Joe Biden's losing Iowa and Ohio by a point less than Hillary Clinton did. So it turns out that what everybody thought was happening in Iowa and Ohio, that this was a state that Donald Trump, that wasn't an outlier in 2016, that it was moving. It's gotten confirmed tonight.
Just pointing out that Blaine Alexander is reporting from Atlanta that the officials there say they are still counting, that the water main is not stopping them from counting, and that the count goes on in Fulton County.
Okay.
Let me bring Casey into the conversation. Casey, Joe Biden positioned himself as the responsible candidate, if I can use that term, of wearing the mask and not doing the big crowds. As these numbers get reported out, are we going to look at that different in terms of his inability to really get out there and shake the hands and do the ground stuff?
Well, it's a difficult calculation, Lester, because if you think about how this pandemic has played out and where many people thought the race stood back in January before we even knew that this pandemic was about to hit us, I think there were a lot of questions about whether any Democrat was going to be in a really competitive race with President Trump come the fall. And then we have been grappling ever since with a historic pandemic. So I think it depends on where you start your analysis in terms of how we think about it. But it's certainly true that there was a big difference in how these two candidates actually campaigned on the ground. And I know Republicans certainly are saying that their get out the vote efforts in places like Miami-Dade County in Florida made a real difference for them, especially in communities where, and we're still getting the data on first-time voters, but it's possible that President Trump actually benefited from first-time voters in a significant way that's not typical for Republican candidates. Typically, we would assume that it would be the Democratic candidate, just because that's kind of how it's played out in the past, who would benefit from voters who have never showed up to the polls before. And there may be some evidence that we're still sorting through that may not be the case. And I think there's some questions about whether having a more robust, even if it wasn't Joe Biden, the candidate himself, having more volunteers knocking on doors with their masks on. Now, Democrats will say those kind of tactics were unpopular with their voters, unpopular with independents who were concerned about the pandemic, didn't want a stranger knocking on their door, didn't want to go to a packed rally. And we may be seeing that cultural difference and that cultural shift play out. I mean, I think we've all come to experience that not only are people voting in these different ways, but they're experiencing and living in the pandemic in different ways. They're taking different steps. The codes of even etiquette of wearing a mask can be different depending on the community or place where you live. And we're seeing that start to line up with these trends. So it's really hard to know. And I think part of why, of course, some of this data may have been so wrong is because we've never done this before. We've never polled in a pandemic. We've never had early vote that was this massive. We simply don't know how voters have been motivated in something like this. So there's a lot of unknowns here, and we're only just really starting to sort through them.
We're going to go to Hallie, but I think I want to quickly go back to Chuck because I saw you flash.
We get excited when we finally get some returns in, right? Well, you were complaining about Nevada, Savannah?
I was inquiring about it.
All right. Well, look, we delivered. Nevada said, wait a minute. We got 74% of the vote in now. You know what that meant? Clark County came in. Okay, is what happens here. By the way, you want to see how important it is. This is already 75% of the vote in. So this is...
Is that the kind of margin he needs to carry it?
Yeah, let's take a look at that. In the middle between Clinton and Obama, but both of them carried Nevada. This is certainly enough to get them through. But look, you got to wait, and we got to wait and see. And again, I do think this is going to be one of those states, if it ends up a 2 or 3 point, that somebody in Team Trump's going to say, maybe we spent too much time in Arizona and not enough time in Nevada.
Let's go to Hallie Jackson, who's at the White House. I know we have been expecting to hear from the president. What's the latest on that?
The holding pattern on that for now, Savannah. The president will come out, as he often does, and speak when he wants to come out and speak. And right now, I have been getting indications of zero timing guidance. We had anticipated that maybe it was going to be a little bit earlier, based on some reporting from inside the room, where we are starting to get a sense of what the scene is like from attendees there. But for now, TBD on when the president will speak. Although he will at some point here in the wee hours of November 4th. Talking about some of the states that we're having a conversation about tonight, a couple of observations. Minnesota, I have to tell you, for months, I've been talking to people inside the Trump campaign, and they have been trying to push the idea that Minnesota was a state that was in play. That went away, I think, in the last 6 weeks or so, and kind of came back with a vengeance tonight with the comments from, for example, Jason Miller and others. That is a projection from the Trump camp that obviously turned out to be incorrect. With our projection here tonight, it is a little bit of a sense of kind of the one that got away back in 2016 that they had been hoping to potentially capture, but as Chuck notes, didn't really put some of the resources there that they put into other states. Georgia, really interesting here. We've been talking, and our team here, myself, to a lot of people, and I can tell you that multiple sources that I've talked to just in the last couple of minutes are eyeballing that and pointing out how very, very close it looks. Obviously, Fulton, a lot of eyeballs on that. This was a state that they had been feeling, I think, optimistic about, not super confident about earlier in the day, but certainly not, terrible about. I did have one person say, hey, we're kind of cautiously optimistic about Georgia at this point moving in, but I don't know that anybody thought it was going to end up being as close as it turns out to be being at this point tonight. So I think that's a place where you're seeing a lot of focus right now and a lot of sort of waiting for some more of those numbers to come in. When you talk about the way that the Trump campaign has conducted its strategy in his last couple of weeks. And Lester, this speaks to the point that you were making before about, frankly, campaigning in a pandemic and an election happening in the middle of a, once in a generation, once in a lifetime pandemic here. The Trump campaign came under a lot of fire repeatedly, frankly, from people who were concerned that folks were showing up at rallies, not social distancing at all. Very sparse mask wearing. I was just in North Carolina just 24 hours, 36 hours ago, and saw the same thing in Fayetteville. Not a lot of people in masks, despite coronavirus cases spiking in some of these states. That all said, the Trump campaign continued to hold those events because, in large part, they thought it really helped them with the ground game, with the get out the vote effort. They talked about the voter registration, the sort of push that they were doing with people who were coming to Trump rallies, including, according to their data, a number of people who had not shown up to rallies before and maybe hadn't voted before as well. So they are crediting that, at least in some part, to the ability to be turning people out in some of these places. And then one final note, I do think there is some interesting information coming in, at least from what we're hearing from sources regarding seniors. And we know that seniors, suburban women, some other demographic groups have been moving away from President Trump, according to early polling. There are some indications that the Trump campaign is feeling more confident about those numbers in particular as we sort of wait for some of these outstanding, really important states to come through.
All right, Hallie, thanks.
We're going to take a quick break. We'll check in with Georgia, actually, because we did get a few more votes in. Our Decision 2020 election night coverage rolls on. to have you with us.
This fall, we're right there with you. Whether you're back to school
What do you guys think? We're excited.
or back to work, we're keeping you safe.
I love being back.
Every morning on Today.
Good morning. Welcome to Today. We're glad to have you with us.
This fall, we're right there with you. Whether you're back to school
What do you guys think? We're excited.
or back to work, we're keeping you safe.
I love being back.
Every morning on Today.
Police murder of unarmed black men has been an American way of death across centuries. After seeing the most comprehensive police reform bill ever introduced in Congress, I've begun to wonder if now is the time. If now is the time the protesters finally win.
The Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell. Weeknights at 10 on MSNBC.
You ready to go to work? I'm so ready to go to work.
She's Joe Biden's choice to be next in line. But who is Kamala Harris? Join me, Joy Reid, as I explore her life's journey from Oakland to Washington on my 6-part podcast, Kamala, Next in Line. New episodes every Monday. Subscribe for free wherever you get your podcasts.
A real close-knit group of nurses who pulled together when their boss needed help battling coronavirus.
You're not just any patient, you're their friend.
These folks saved my life.
Thank God that there are people who want to run towards a pandemic as opposed to running away from a pandemic.
Introducing the MSNBC Daily, featuring written perspectives by experts you know and trust for a better understanding of the stories that matter most. Check out the MSNBC Daily today at msnbc.com.
You're watching NBC News Now. We've got some breaking news.
Are people there concerned about what impact this could have on the election?
It's news made for your streaming world.
Watch what they do, not what they say.
President Trump and Joe Biden hit the trail. At the center of this campaign, coronavirus, the story. The battleground blitz as we enter the final stretch of the 2020 race.
From every angle.
If you were sitting here talking to Joe Biden and President Trump, what would you want to tell them right now?
On the ground.
The winds fanning these flames are expected to last another 24 hours.
And in depth.
We now have 2 vaccine trials on hold. Should people be concerned?
NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
That time of the night when I can say good morning, everybody. Almost 2 a.m. in the East. Casey, we got a race going tonight, and you're going to zero in Nevada for us.
We are, and we are going to bring in the one and only man to talk to in Nevada. That is John Ralston, who Chuck was talking about earlier on in our broadcast. John, we're thrilled to have you. We're hoping you can pronounce Washoe County correctly for us, one of the 2 key areas in your home state. But I think the top line question here, so many people were assuming that this was in the bag for Democrats. It wasn't something that we were going to have to worry about having on our electoral college maps tonight as a swing state. So the top line question to you, is it in play?
Well, Casey, if you'd listened to me or seen my hashtag, you would know we always matter. So, yes, we are a swing state. Listen, it looked like after 2016, even though Trump won the state lost the state by only 2.5 points, that maybe we weren't so much of a swing state anymore. The race was actually not as close. The Republicans made up a lot of ground on election day. But listen, I thought that Biden had done what he needed to do. The Democrats had done what they always do here in Nevada, as you know, Casey, which is they build up a whole bunch of votes in early voting, and then the Republicans just don't have enough on election day to catch up. They had a big lead in Clark County, which is Las Vegas, and Washoe County, which you pronounced perfectly, is northern Nevada with Reno, and that is where the real key swing part of the Nevada is now, Casey. And Biden is up by 14,000 votes in Washoe County right now in the first returns, and those first returns are a substantial part of the vote, maybe 70%. Excuse me. So Clinton won there by 2,700 votes. Biden's up by 14,000. He's up by about 74,000 in Clark County, and he's down by 30,000 or so in rural Nevada. So they're hitting their marks. We just don't know what the rest of the votes are going to hold, Casey.
So, John, one thing I think we've all been thinking about is obviously how hard hit Nevada's economy was by the coronavirus, the tourism industry, tourists not coming to Las Vegas. How much do you think that's impacting the vote tonight? And is that benefiting Donald Trump at all because he's focused so much on opening things back up?
That's a great question, Casey, and it's one of the strategies that the Republicans have used here is to say, listen, Donald Trump wants to open up the country, open up the state. The governor, who is a Democrat, Steve Sisolak, has shut down the state. This is their argument. He has caused the economic havoc, not Donald Trump. They've essentially tried to substitute the Democratic governor for Joe Biden here in the state and run against him as much as they run against Joe Biden. Now, the governor's numbers have suffered during the pandemic. There's no question about it. But every poll that I've seen, Casey, shows Trump running behind Sisolak in terms of handling the coronavirus. But people are upset here, Casey. You know, the economy is just essentially based on one industry. That industry, the casino industry, has been crushed. You have tens of thousands of people who can't get their unemployment checks, and so they're mad. They're angry. And so if they think the Democratic governor is to blame and conflate him with Joe Biden, that is why I think a lot of Republicans thought that Trump could win this state.
All right, John Ralston, thank you very much for your insights. Always the first person we want to call when we have questions about Nevada. Savannah, it seems the top line there that while there are a lot of folks watching Nevada closely, and it was, as Ralston pointed out, something that the President Trump's campaign hoped they could put into play. Right now, Joe Biden really actually a little bit out ahead of where Hillary Clinton was when she won in 2016.
All right. Well, I've been asking about Nevada. You scratched that itch. Casey, thank you so much. We got a lot more to come. Our election night coverage continues in just a moment.
More chaotic than ever. It's my job to ask the tough questions, left and right, and help you make sense of it all.
You ready to go to work? I'm so ready to go to work.
She's Joe Biden's choice to be next in line. But who is Kamala Harris? Join me, Joy Reid, as I explore her life's journey from Oakland to Washington on my 6-part podcast, Kamala, Next in Line. New episodes every Monday. Subscribe for free wherever you get your podcasts.
Washington feels more chaotic than ever. It's my job to ask the tough questions, left and right, and help you make sense of it all.
You ready to go to work? I'm so ready to go to work.
She's Joe Biden's choice to be next in line. But who is Kamala Harris? Join me, Joy Reid, as I explore her life's journey from Oakland to Washington on my 6-part podcast, Kamala, Next in Line. New episodes every Monday. Subscribe for free wherever you get your podcasts.
For breaking news in our changing world, download the NBC News app.
President Trump and Joe Biden hit the trail. At the center of this campaign, coronavirus.
The story.
The battleground blitz as we enter the final stretch of the 2020 race.
From every angle.
If you were sitting here talking to Joe Biden and President Trump, what would you want to tell them right now?
On the ground.
The wind standing these flames are expected to last another 24 hours.
And in depth.
We now have 2 vaccine trials on hold. Should people be concerned?
NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Good morning. Welcome to Today. We're glad to have you with us.
This fall, we're right there with you, whether you're back to school or back to work. We're keeping you safe. I love being back. Every morning on Today.
Police murder of unarmed black men has been an American way of death across centuries. After seeing the most comprehensive police reform bill ever introduced in Congress, I've begun to wonder if now is the time. If now is the time the protesters finally win.
The Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell. Weeknights at 10 on MSNBC.
Good morning. Welcome to Today. We're glad to have you with us.
This fall, we're right there with you, whether you're back to school or back to work. We're keeping you safe. I love being back. Every morning on Today.
Welcome back to NBC News coverage of Election Night 2020 that's extended well into Wednesday, the wee hours of Wednesday morning here. We're going to look at some Senate races now. We'll put them up for you.
Yeah, in Minnesota, Tina Smith is the incumbent, and she's going back to Congress in the race there. In New Mexico, Ben Ray Lujan wins, the projected winner, I should say. And in Iowa, Joni Ernst, the incumbent, headed back to Congress at the projected winner there.
Let's look at North Carolina. This is one Democrats hope to flip. Tom Tillis and Cal Cunningham. It is too close to call. The Georgia Senate two-way race, Purdue and Ossoff, this is going to go to it's like a runoff.
In Maine, too early to call. We've got the ranked voting there, so you actually have several candidates, but that's the top two right there. You can see where they're shaking out with 57% of the expected vote in.
The Montana Senate race, this is too early to call between Daines and Bullock.
But Daines having the lead there. And in Michigan, too early to call. Let's go to Alaska. Too early to call there. This is an interesting race. And we'll see how it shakes out. But here's the Senate at this hour. Let's see where it's all landing. Oh, 46 to 46, so all tied up. And remember, Democrats who were hoping early in the night to regain control of the Senate would have had to net out plus 3 seats if Joe Biden wins the White House. So there's still a lot of ifs and buts about that. So
I'll tell you, I had North Carolina, Iowa, Montana, those 3 Senate seats. In my head, the party that wins 2 of those 3 probably had a straighter shot to the majority. And right now we've called 1, and we're waiting on Montana Senate. We're waiting on North Carolina Senate. I just want to take you to Georgia presidential here. As you can see, the margin's down to just 118,000. And we are in the stage where we're getting all sorts of, let me tell you something about Doherty County here. For instance, it's a massive amount of vote missing, 30,000 votes. So when I said there was going to be we thought it was all Atlanta, but we're in that stage where it's going to be, hey, Doherty County, this is where Albany State University is. It's an historically black university. So there's a whole bunch of vote here that we expect to end up being good for Biden. As you can see, this is a good district for him. So a good county. It was a good county for Hillary Clinton. So look, go back to the statewide split here. That 118, there is plenty of vote here. There's plenty of extraneous vote there. President doesn't have a lot of vote remaining. There's a few of these rural counties have a little bit here, but I'll tell you right now, Georgia, this looks like a race that I think it ain't going to get called tonight. My guess is we're going to have to wait to see what kind of extraneous ballots show up tomorrow.
What put Georgia on the map in this situation? I mean, earlier in the campaign, no one was talking about Georgia as
it's first of all, it's right there. I mean, it's these Atlanta suburbs. I had a Republican strategist say what's happening in the Atlanta suburbs. And by the way, we saw this. In many ways, Georgia has been on the president's mind from the get-go. What was the very first special election in the President Trump, in the era of President Trump? Georgia's 6 in this Atlanta suburb. They didn't win. John Ossoff, who's been running for office the entire time that Trump's been president, he was that nominee. He barely lost. But at the time, the loss, a lot of Democrats said, hey, there's something happening in the suburbs. Well, we know what happened in 2018 in the suburbs, and now that's what's going on here. And by the way, Stacey Abrams, her organization has been nonstop in the state of Georgia since her loss in that governor's race. she deserves some credit here for making the state what it is right now.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching my channel. God bless you. Please subscribe. And I'll catch you on the next upload, live, and or premiere. Thank you.
Let's take a brief pause right here. Our Decision 2020 election night coverage continues right here on NBC after this brief break.
Addict than ever. It's my job to ask the tough questions, left and right, and help you make